Three, two, and one.
Our next guest is a pride of Regis Park. He's a pride of Brentwood. He's a pride of Nassau Community College. He's a pride of Brockport. He's coached at Islip. He's now an assistant varsity coach at Bellport. His name is Rob Cuffie. How are you, Rob?
What's up, guys? How you doing?
Good to see you, Cuff.
You too, brother.
Cuff, you know what I think of you. I've been excited to talk to you. I've known you for a while. I want to get, right into it in terms of wrestling. I know that you've done a lot of things in your life. Yes. Rob, so you were obviously, you were a very successful wrestler in high school. You were, I believe, you were All-American at Nassau. You placed, I think, fourth twice at Brockport, but there's a lot of kind of stops along the way, right?
Yes.
So, we just had Coach Carl Adams on a few days ago, which we're going to be airing that shortly. And I believe that you grew up in kind of close proximity to where Coach Carl Adams was in Regis Park. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. We grew up in the same neighborhood in Regis Park, tough neighborhood. And our families actually know each other, and they actually lived across the street from each other before I was born. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what's in the water over there. I might just hang out there. I might get tougher if I just could walk up and down the street. So, you've done so many things in wrestling, which I want to get into. But, how did you first, how old were you, and how did you first get involved in the sport of wrestling?
So it's funny. My older brother, who was a really, really good, outstanding wrestler. We used to live in Bay Shore, and he was going to the wrestling club down in Bay Shore, down in the dungeon in Fifth Avenue, with Coach Hubbard and Coach Leggio. And one day, I'm about 5 years old. He's like, you need to come down and come check it out. And I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about wrestling. So I go down there, and it was just too intense for me. Probably lasted about a week. Back then, the older guys and the younger guys practiced together. And anybody that knows Coach Hubbard, knows he's.
I've been in that room. I've been in the dungeon. Yeah, I've been there.
Dude, man, he's very intense. And at 5 years old, when you're in that room and you're seeing what's going on, any 5-year-old will get nervous and a little shaken, and that's what happened. I lasted about a week.
I can't imagine you getting nervous and shaking it. I don't know if I believe some of this story.
Listen, I went down there. I had G.I. Joe figures in my pocket while I'm practicing.
Mike carries those around in his pocket too sometimes.
Yeah, I do.
Linus with a blanket. That's me. I'm sorry. I'm the blanket guy.
Yeah.
I go down, and then within a week of practice, he enters me into a tournament. I'm 5 years old. I'm too young to wrestle. I was always a big kid, so I'm probably wrestling kids that are 8 years old, and I ended up winning the tournament, right? But after that day, I never went back because I was just, I was too afraid. I was young, so I stopped wrestling, and I didn't start again until ninth grade. Yeah, ninth grade.
So you're in. I know. Look, Brentwood is in terms of school. Was that what you're in ninth grade? Were you on when you started? Was that on the? You had a freshman team. I'm just trying to figure. I know things are a little bit different in terms of the size.
So in Brentwood in ninth grade, it's a freshman team.
Right.
So let's go back to middle school. So middle school, I went out for the wrestling team in seventh grade. The coach. I don't know how much he knew about wrestling, but I go down there. My first day of practice, I'm wrestling a guy who's been there. He's a really good wrestler, and we're wrestling, and the kid, he ends up biting me on the chest. And I had a bad reaction.
How'd that go for the other guy?
I think anyone would, right?
Yeah, of course.
The coach throws me off the team, so I didn't wrestle in seventh grade. So then I went out for the team in eighth grade, and at the beginning of the season, as we're practicing, my dad passed away. My dad passed away in the beginning of the season, and I didn't get to wrestle that season. So. It was tough. It was.
What was his name? What was his name?
Robert.
Okay.
He actually passed away. He was 35, and he was playing basketball with my little brothers and passed out. Never had a heart, never had a problem. Healthy, ran. He was in great shape, and it was devastating to me, and it took a long time to kind of bounce back from that. So, back to ninth grade. So I go out for the team in ninth grade. It's a freshman team. It's like a middle school. And I wrestled. I got 6 matches. When you're a middle school guy and you're a bigger guy, there's not many people for you to wrestle. You know what I mean? So I got 6 matches, and that was it. After that, I went up to the high school and wrestled. It's crazy.
So, I mean, Rob, we know each other for a long time, and I'm not going to give anybody's name. I'm not going to say anybody's name who doesn't deserve notoriety, but I know there was an athlete who was pretty successful around our time that went to Brentwood, and I think that he ended up, becoming a double murderer, drive around with bodies in his car and just, crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And so from, and I'm not saying that that's commonplace from your neighborhood, but Brentwood is a tougher neighborhood. It's probably one of the tougher neighborhoods on Long Island, no matter which way you go.
Yeah.
After your dad died, who's the patriarch in the family that you're looking up to? Who's giving you your guidance on what it's like to be a man? You graduate, you don't hit the goal, become a Suffolk County champ, which has derailed a lot of young men's future because of how it was set up when we were kids. You had to win a county title to be able to get the colleges to look at you. You certainly had the skill sets to go wrestle nationally. And I think, again, a lot of us, we got caught up in that system. So who was the patriarch? And then walk us through, you graduated, you didn't really hit your goals. You went and did a couple things, you kind of veered off, but you ultimately got to Brockport. You were ranked first in the country. You ended up becoming a 2-time All-American, if I have my stats right from Matty D, the best in the biz in research and development and data rather. So how does that work after your father dies, and who's leading you at that point?
So, after my dad passed away, my older brother, he was he just graduated high school. So, he's young, he's 18 years old. And, obviously I always looked up to my older brother. He's the reason why I really got into the sport. He was very successful on the kid wrestling level, and, multiple time kid state champ. So he was a guy. It's crazy because to this day, coaches, come up to me and ask me if I know, do you know a guy named Lamont Cuffie? And I'm like, yes. To this day, these grown men are like, man, that dude was he was amazing, and his first tournament in ninth grade, so, he was a guy that, that I looked up to, that, he obviously, but I had, my uncle, one of my uncles, my Uncle Tommy was, he was a guy that stepped up really big, and he taught me a lot of things, and guys, guys like Uncle Tony, Uncle Tony was a guy who, he always steered me in the right direction, and always gave me those talks about, how to stay away from certain things and situations and things I needed to do to get where I am today. But ultimately, when I got to high school, man, Bob Panarello, he was
your high school coach, right? Now he's the athletic director of Bistro, right? Yep.
He was my high school coach. And I remember when I first got to 10th grade, I started the season. I tell you, man, I had some bad luck. I started the season, and in the beginning of the season, I broke my hand, and I didn't get to wrestle the season. But, Bob Panarello was a guy who, he was my mentor. Without him, I don't think that I have the drive to be what I am today. I don't have the idea to be what I am today as far as a coach and a phys ed teacher. He was the guy that, that I kind of, I actually looked up to, and I kind of try to model my life after, because, he showed me so many other things, so many different ways of living, and from what I was used to, you know what I mean? So he, without that guy, I don't know if I even make it through the high school team. He was one of those coaches where, you build that relationship with, and you just want to do anything to please the guy. You want him to be happy. He took the time with me. He brought me into his family. His family, his wife, his daughter, they shared him with me. He was just, he was just a guy that, I was blessed to just have in my life.
Well, you have that effect. You should know this. I've been around you in the coaching, and watching you and even by side with you at ISUB. I mean, you have that effect, Cuff, on kids. I hope you know that. I want to go back a little bit in time. So your dad passed away. Who are you, who are you living with at the time, after that? Like tell me, what was life like? Yep.
My mom, and my brother. It was tough. It was tough, man. I mean, listen, anybody, you can ask anybody from Broadway about Regis Park. It's the toughest area in Broadway. It's the toughest area and one of the toughest areas on Long Island. I mean, in the era that I grew up in, it was, I mean, you had to be a tough dude. You had to be street smart. And it was tough, man. People didn't have money in Regis Park. And, it was really tough for us. My mom worked, multiple jobs, and, there was nights, being home alone and just getting myself ready for school. And I became really independent, quick at an early age, so it was really tough. It was really tough to be able to live that way and focus on, things like school and wrestling, because there were a lot of situations.
If I asked Corrine, about Rob in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, what would she say? In terms of you obviously had a drive to, you're at home, like you said, you're by yourself, and mom's working, trying to keep you guys afloat. And I came from a little bit of a similar situation. I could relate in terms of my, some of the things that we could talk about off air, but what would mom say about you at 16, 17-year-old Cuff?
She would probably tell you that that she never really had to worry about me. I was for some reason, man, I always made the right decisions. You don't even understand. I mean, you grow up with kids who who are your best friends growing up in elementary school, all the way through middle school. And, at some point, personalities start to change, kids start to get into different things. And I'm talking about, these are my best friends that I was with every day of my life, and, as you start growing up and they start getting into different things, you got to learn how to separate yourself from those types of kids, and, listen, I had a best friend, who, he went to jail for murder. He went to jail for murder. The other two guys, they went to jail for, whatever, drug dealing or whatever it was. Right now, I could have been that kid. I could have, what pulled me away from those kids who were my best friends, who I loved, I loved like brothers, and I was always able to see situations and know when situations weren't good for me. I was always able to tell, that that's not going to work out for me, if I get into that type of situation, because I was smart enough to understand that I was smart enough to look and learn from the people that were around me. I was smart enough to see a guy who, hey, that guy was a great high school athlete, but now guess what? He's standing on the street corner, because, he got locked up because he was doing drugs, so I kind of used that as a learning tool. And what wrestling did was wrestling pulled me from that, and Mike knows, man. I mean, we traveled. I mean, we were, in the summertime, it was weekend after weekend, we traveled, and I did that obviously because I loved wrestling, but I did that because I needed to stay away. I needed to get away from those types of guys who, was still calling me or coming to the house to try to hang out. And, my excuse was, I can't, I gotta go wrestle this weekend, so it was tough. It was really tough, man.
You want the best of high school wrestling? Long Island Wrestling Association's website brings you the best. Wrestling is one of the toughest blue-collar sports. The sport has tens of thousands of followers, and at the center of it all is the Long Island Wrestling Association, measuring the gravity of the sport. In 2002, National Hall of Fame wrestling inductee Steve Meehan created the #1 source for wrestling news in New York State. With contributors like Long Island Sports Hall of Fame inductee and historian Andy Slauson, the site is the most comprehensive wrestling website in the country for high school wrestling news. With in-depth analysis, entertaining facts, forums, and trending topics, this site has a treasure trove of historic high school wrestling information, with records dating back to the 1930s. There is no better source for high school wrestling coverage. Long Island Wrestling Association, keeping the wrestling world up to speed.
So speaking of that, I mean, look, I came from a Brady Bunch family, and in a lot of ways. My mom and my dad both smoked cigarettes down to the butt end, and I didn't love to be home on in a house on a weekend just because I was a 15-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Now that you're at Bellport, that's a place that's had a lot of history for a long time in a lot of sports, but it's sort of a little bit, very, very wealthy area, very, very poor area. And you are, been able to walk the line now that you're an adult of seeing both sides. Let's hope that you're falling on the side of living in the wealthy area as a grown adult with, a family, retired, everything else. What are you talking to the kids now about? I mean, you've had a ton of success in a very, very short period of time.
Yeah.
For the other coaches that are listening, what's your approach been? Because it's not just black or white, it's not rich or poor, it's just a school. You're getting athletes from both, and you're able to speak to both of them. What is the mindset of, going down the hallway, not seeing color, not seeing finances, and just getting the most out of every athlete that comes in? What's that mindset like? What can some other coaches glean from having this interview and hearing you speak?
Well, again, I've been at Islip, which is it's a lot different than being at Bellport. And at Islip, I was able to connect with the kids on the same level as the kids at Bellport, right? So, I mean, again, I don't see color, right? So I see the kid the same. I make connections with kids, which is the most important thing. Being able to relate to the kids, no matter what culture they come from, no matter what background they come from. The most important thing is to being able to relate to those kids, because once you can relate to those kids, then they want to hear what you have to say, right? But that wouldn't have been possible if I didn't go through the wrestling system, right? Because again, coming out of Brentwood, again, I grew up in a mostly Black Hispanic community, right? And you hear things about different cultures, and sometimes people start to believe those things because they never get a chance to experience what a different culture is like, right? So what wrestling has done for me, it allowed me to experience that.
Well, let's hear some of the stereotypes. What were some of the stereotypes that you heard of, white or Asian community growing up in an all Black or Hispanic community? What were some of the things that you heard that were, misconstrued or not true?
Well, again, look, listen, you hear, white people are racist, you hear, white people, they're bad, they're this, but at the same time, the Spanish community was saying the same thing about Blacks, you understand, I grew up, my community was majority Hispanic. So all of my best friends growing up, all of them growing up were Puerto Rican, Salvadorian, Ecuadorian, right? And I remember times going to the houses and, the parents were like, telling the kids, I don't know if you should hang out with this kid, right? I was born because, listen, I was a big kid, and I guess because I was Black, and listen, they used to say this Spanish sometimes, but I understood Spanish. I understood because my grandmother was married to a Puerto Rican man, a Hispanic man, for over 40 years. So, I knew Spanish. So whenever they would speak, I would know what they were saying. And, so again, it was like, you experience it no matter what, you hear things from different sides, and no matter Black, white, Spanish, but you would hear these things. And again, like I said, people would start to believe those things, right? Unless you actually experience it for yourself. So me, being a wrestler, and being out in that world and running into guys like Mike Torriero and Mike Cox and Artie Weidler, Jesse Jansen and those guys, and being around those guys, Bob Panarello, taking you in as family, traveling with these guys in the same car, Ed Slaughter. I mean, the guy used to take us all over the country. And
he did. He still is the best. Marty Weidler.
We had our first Sable reference, by the way, Mike Cox. Just want to say we got a lot. Everything gets steered back to Rocky Point. So, Mike, we had a fight. We had a first Sable reference.
That's my guy, right?
Yeah, so, I know that.
So now I'm in.
Mike Cox is the best in the biz too.
Yeah,
the best.
So now, I'm traveling with these guys, and I'm sleeping in the same rooms as these guys in hotels. And we're becoming friends. And next thing you know, I'm in these guys' houses, and their families are taking me in and treating me. And you think, you're like, man, that's not true with the stuff that I heard growing up. And I'm sure it was the same thing for a lot of those guys. I'm sure they heard things about Black people, and then when they got the experience being around me, they're like, no, not everybody's like that, And that's why I say, like, if everybody wrestled in this world, I mean, the world would be a better place, because you get to learn everyone. And again, I've never experienced, in all my years of wrestling, I've never experienced a racial moment from any of the guys that I've been around, so, again, it's just, it's different, man. And you hear so many different things, but again, when you experience them for yourself, that's when you learn, and people are always going to say things, and that's the problem with the world today. You got so many people stuck in their own area that don't get a chance to get out and experience, other people, other cultures, and they just hear one thing, and they have their own way of thinking, so it's pretty tough out there, man.
Well, Cuff, when I think of a role model, and I think of no excuses. Tell us a little bit about buses and trains and getting to practice. I want people to hear this message, in terms of that. Tell us about, I know there's some kind of almost folklore of how you had to get to practice sometimes.
Yeah. So check this out, man. So Bob Panarello, right? I used to babysit his daughter, right? My wife and I used to babysit his daughter when I was in high school. And, she graduated from Harvard just, a couple of years ago. She's an intelligent,
unbelievable softball player, right? Yeah.
Unbelievable softball player. And, right. My daughter idolized her. And
well, your daughter's an unbelievable softball player too, right?
My daughter actually wore her number in high school, just, in honor of her.
Jasmine, right? Yep.
So, one day, Bob went out, and we were babysitting, and he came home, and I said, Coach, can you take me home? So he throws me a set of keys. And he goes, you can take yourself home. So I'm like, what do you mean? And he gave me a car. He gave me my first car.
Get out of here, really?
He gave me my first car.
He's an unbelievable man. Yeah,
and it was his car. It was his car all through college, and it was an older car, but I was grateful, And he gave me his first car, and I was using it and whatever, and I was getting to Nassau, and the car broke down, and we couldn't fix it. So what I did was, I always thought ahead of the game. When I graduated high school, I got a lot of money. And what I did was I kept it under a dresser for the whole summer. I never spent it. I said, because, I'm pretty sure there's going to be some times where I'm going to need this in college. At this point, I'm 18, I'm really taking care of myself. I'm working. So the car broke down. And what I did was every day I took a train and 2 buses and walked, a mile to school every day. And
I want to hear that. You took a train, you took 2 buses and a mile just to get to practice.
Just to get to school.
Get to school.
Right?
Okay.
I had to make that 9, 8:15, 9 o'clock class. So I was getting up at 5 in the morning. It was still dark out, right? And I would get to school and not knowing how I was going to get home, because by the time I got out of practice, I mean, there weren't really many buses running. So again, guys like Mike Cox and guys that were on the team, I would get rides home, or I would call Uncle Tony, and Uncle Tony would come pick me up. So I did that for a long time, but that was just the drive that I had, man. I knew that I couldn't grow up the way I did in Regis Park, in Brentwood. I needed more, and I wanted more, and I was willing to do whatever it took to make sure that I did have more, and that was it, man. I ran out of money. But guys like Uncle Tony and Bob Panarello, they took care of me, man. And
Uncle Tony's is absolutely the best. We definitely should have him on.
Tony Negron. Yeah.
Yeah, we saw him a couple of summers ago. I know that his kids trained at NC State, and
Yeah,
I'm a fan of everybody from Long Island. Uncle Tony is, he's an icon of Long Island.
yeah.
One thing that I do want to know, it's kind of the last thing I really want to get out from you, because I think I know the story, but I don't know this question. What's the best piece of advice that you've ever been given, and what's your life mantra? What do you kind of go by, and then what do you put back out to your student athletes?
I was just always told, man, that nobody's ever going to give you anything. Whatever you get, you got to earn. And that's what I did, my whole life. Even guys like Uncle Tony, my uncle, Bob Panarello. When you get to a certain age, nobody's trying to hear your excuses. You got to make your own way, and and that's what I tell my guys all the time. Because listen, I got guys at Bellport that have the same situation that I had growing up in Brentwood, right? And a lot of times, they come into practice and they're feeling sorry for themselves, or they're feeling like they can't do it because they had a rough night. And I simply sit down with them and I have conversations, and I let them into my world. I let them into my life and tell them, hey, listen, there's nothing you can tell me that I haven't gone through. Nothing in this world. And the only way you're going to get out of it is to do what you have to do in school. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. I'm always going to be here to help you, but you got to take care of your business, and you got to do what you got to do in school. I see a lot of guys, they're so concerned about making money. That's their thing. I got to make money. I got to make money. And I tell them, I said, listen, you got the rest of your life to work. I said, right now, you got to take this moment, this wrestling, because you're going to get more out of wrestling than anything in this world. I mean, this sport prepares you more than any other sport for life, for real life. And that's what I tell these guys. And I said, you can come here every day and you can work hard and do what you got to do and maintain your grades, and you're going to make it somewhere. And I'm going to help you get there, but you got to put the work in too. And that's the thing. A lot of these guys are so used to not being pushed, not being held accountable. And that's what I try to do to those guys. And there's times where I got to get tough with them, and there's a lot of times where I got to put my arm around them. And that's what that's what works for these guys. And that's what people have done for me. Again, there have been times growing up where I was feeling sorry for myself. But what is that going to do for you, right? I mean, one day I'm going to be 30 years old and nobody's going to want to hear that, and nobody's going to take care of me. So you got to make your own way. And that's what I tell these guys all the time.
Oh, Cuffie, you've grabbed every opportunity. There's one more thing I want to talk about. We talked a little bit about Jasmine. Tell us, you obviously had a super successful career for Coach Murray at Brockport,
Yeah.
but that wasn't without kind of obstacle either, right? I mean, I know you dealt with some injuries, right? And you were blessed with Jasmine, right? Tell us about that. How old were you when Jasmine came into this world, and how did you kind of manage that and still, be a two-time All-American?
So we were pregnant with Jasmine when I was a sophomore at Nassau.
Okay.
Right now, I did take some time off of Nassau for getting hurt, but my sophomore year going into nationals, we were probably, we were probably like 7 months pregnant.
By the way, I met your wife. I'm going to make sure you keep saying we were pregnant.
Well, yeah, because when I say we, it's
I'm kidding.
I'm going through it with her.
I know. I'm kidding.
Well, it sounds like your wife has been. I'm a nearly 40-year-old single guy, and if I ever get jealous, it's sometimes hearing a woman speak emphatically about their man. And there was just one of the Tampa Bay Bucks players just won the Super Bowl, and he was on with his high school girlfriend. They were doing angels in the confetti. It sounds like your wife has been your rock. It sounds like you haven't been doing this. It's been alone. Don't get it twisted, but she's been there, side by side for a long time, huh?
Since I was 17.
There you go.
Since 17.
So Jasmine came along. You were in your second year at Nassau, and kind of walk us through that. So
that year in Nassau, was a tough year. That my sophomore year. You know, I was in the quarterfinals of nationals, and I was up 7-1, you know, with 25 seconds left in the quarterfinals, and I tore my adductor from the bone. So I tore my groin from the bone.
That's
25 seconds left, and it was tough, man, because, you know, the match before that, I beat the guy 13-2. He took third, and then the kid I got hurt against in the corners, up 7-1. He won it that day. You know, I just felt like everything. And at that time, I was the #1 wrestler in the country in JUCO, and that time it was just like my world ended, man, because everything I worked for up until that point, I just felt like it was taken away from me. So, you know, after that, coming home, I didn't plan to wrestle anymore. You know, Jasmine was born, and it was an amazing thing, man. You know, it was a scary thing because I was young, and, you know, I didn't have my education yet, but it was amazing, and it helped me get through so many of the negative thoughts that I was having because of what happened at nationals, you know. So we had Jasmine, and you know, I was just working. I was working and you know, provided for my family. And I had no intentions of going back to wrestle again.
How'd you end up? You know, I love listening to you. You know, anytime you talk about Jasmine, you light up. I love listening. How did you? And Mike, I didn't mean to cut you off, but how did you end up? I just want to complete. How did you end up back? You know, it's not like Brockport's around the corner, right? How did you end up all the way up there? That's pretty kind of a far ride.
Yeah. So I remember, like, when I was a junior in high school, Murray. I was at the Northeast Regionals, you know, which is a incredible tournament. You know,
at Brockport, right? It's at Brockport, right? Yeah.
And I ended up taking third in that tournament. I lost to Damian Hahn in the semifinals.
Pretty big name. Yeah.
We had a great match, and, you know, and then Murray, you know, he came up to me. He's like, "Oh, you should come to Brockport," and I'm just like, you know, I wasn't really thinking that far ahead, you know. So after I got hurt, I was getting calls by a lot of big time Division I schools. You know, Coach Murray and Coach Edmonds were talking to all these coaches, because at that time, again, I was ranked in the country. I beat a couple Division I All-Americans, you know, as a JUCO guy, and we get these phone calls, and then all of a sudden, when I got hurt, I didn't hear a thing. And not that I really wanted to wrestle again, because I was just like, you know what, you know, for that to happen to me at that moment, I'm like, it's just not meant to be. So I remember one day we were home, and we were outside, and I was probably cutting the grass or something, and I got a phone call, and it was Coach Murray, and he said, he goes, "Listen," he goes, "you know, why don't you come up to Brockport and you know, come to school here and come wrestle for me?" And I'm like, "Listen, Coach," I said, I appreciate it. I said, "but, you know, I have a kid right now." I said, there's no way I'm going 7 hours away, you know, with my kid. I said, I'm gonna stay home. I'm gonna work. You know, I'm going to provide a life for my family, and you know, that's it. I said, I appreciate the offer. I said, but unfortunately, I'm not going to go. So he goes, "Listen," he goes, "if you change your mind, I got all your paperwork filled out." He's like, love
that guy.
Yeah.
He's like, "I got it all filled out. So if you change your mind, call me back." I'm like, I said, "Thanks, Coach." I said, "but I'm really not." I said, "I'm probably not going to change my mind." So we hung up the phone, and then my wife says, she goes, "Who was that?" I'm like, "It was Coach Murray." And she goes, "Well, what did he want?" I said, "Well, you know, he wanted me to go up to Brockport." I'm like, I said, "The guy's out of his mind." And she looks at me. I'm like, "Why are you looking at me like that?" And she goes, "Well, I think you should go." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Listen," she goes, "I think that it's a great opportunity for you." She goes, "And, you know, you know, Jasmine's young. Jasmine's probably about 6-7 months at the time." She goes, "She'll be too young to remember. You'll come home often. I know you'll come home as much as you can." She goes, "But, you know, you go up there for 2 years," she goes, "and you'll be able to provide, you know, help us provide a better life." She goes, and that's important. And
it's unbelievable foresight, right? I mean, it's unbelievable.
I couldn't, you know, at first I'm like, there's no way, I'm not doing that, you know, because I just couldn't leave I couldn't do it. And, you know, we talked more about it, and I ended up going, and it was the hardest thing I ever had to do in my life. You know, no matter what you do. I mean, I worked like an animal that summer, and I saved up so much money, and I just left it home. But even with that, you just, you know, it just didn't feel right, you know, and I wasn't there physically, you know, and it took a toll on me. But I went up there to Brockport, and I stayed focused, you know, and I took care of business, you know.
Where were you working out of curiosity? Where were you working that time out of
Sounds like
curiosity?
I was working at Home Depot, man.
All right. You were part of the Go Orange, yeah.
I was, it's funny, man, because Home Depot was actually a fun job, but, and I loved all the people that I worked with, but, I knew that, that wasn't enough for me, it wasn't going to be enough, and at the end of the day, she was right. And to this day, she's right. It was the smartest decision that we made together, to be able to, to do that and have a pretty good life now. You know what I mean? But it was tough. It was tough, man. Just competing like that. It was really tough. It was, going to school and competing and then, worrying about your family and your kids because you're not there, it really messes with you mentally. And it kind of takes a different person to be able to try to block that out when you're competing, because, like I know, Mike, when you're on that type of level, when you're wrestling, and at Brockport, all we wrestle is Division I. All we wrestle is, until conferences and nationals, it's all we wrestled. We're at the Michigan Open, we're at the East Stroudsburg Open, we're at the Oklahoma tournament that we have, which is Penn State, Ohio State, Oklahoma. You just can't, to compete against guys like that and to stay mentally tough and focused was tough, man. But somehow I did it, somehow.
Well, that Brockport room is an inspiring room to go to. So for you to be able to have your name, for you to be able to have your name up on that wall. I know as a kid, I went there often as a child when we were kids training at the Brockport camp. I started going there at 12 years old. Another shout out to somebody else who Darren Goldstein got into wrestling and opened doors for. If it wasn't for Darren Goldstein, Mike Torriero would have had no sense of wrestling in the outside world. Coach Winkle was my high school coach, but Darren's the one that he put me in the car and gave it to me. But my point to you is, the Brockport room is a prideful room. Frank Famiano, the Fallsbury Flop, the guy who created a reverse lift and was an Olympian. To be on that wall, just by yourself is quite an accomplishment. To go and do what you've done is, I wasn't living it with you, but I know that you were a peer mentor to a lot of us, right? Because I think that we did know that you were, playing with a hand down, if you will, when we were traveling and going places. And the fact that you were able to keep on top of it's notable.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, man. And I never tried, I never tried to make excuses. That's why you never knew, you would never know just by hanging out with me, the situation that I was in. I don't care if you're from my team or you're not from my team. I'm gonna go over, I'll go over to you, have a conversation with you, and you're gonna remember me forever,
Sure.
That's what it's about, man. That's what it's about.
Well, we appreciate you, and we'll definitely be in touch. Go Clippers. We love Bellport. We love you, Cuff. Say hi to Coach Chuck, and we'll be following you. Thanks, Coach.
Chuck is awesome, man. Hey, I appreciate you guys. And again, before we get off, Mike, I appreciate you, man. You were a guy that, growing up, you were a little younger than me, but man, you were special, dude. And I enjoyed watching you wrestle, and I enjoyed, being around you and the other guys, all those years. And it's guys like you who changed the mindset of a kid like me coming out of where I came from, and it was always about just a person, and you showed me a lot of love, and in return, I showed love too. So, it was guys like you that make this world better, man. And I appreciate you. And shout out to Mike.